Later with Mo Kelly on KFI AM 640.
That's where I actually wanted to center my remarks for my final thought tonight. Because as a political nerd, I watch all the State of the Unions, and tomorrow is the State of the Union. And usually they are boring as all get out, and they reveal very little about the present or future of our nation. Usually they're pretty pro forma and pretty predictable. Tomorrow, I'm sure that the State of the Union will be absolutely none of that, given the moment we're in and the president we have. This is the Trump administration 2.0. It's going to be very different than the first time around. You can bet we're going to hear about tariffs. We'll hear about the pausing of aid to Ukraine and the process of slashing supposed waste from the federal government. I don't have to be psychic. You know that that's going to be a part of the State of the Union. You can also bet that Republicans will stand and applaud every single word that President Trump offers, and Democrats will sit on their hands accordingly. You know, one side of the House will go up and the other side will sit down. There will be zero unity or conciliation. We're going to be as partisan as ever. Tomorrow will be no different. There will also likely be insults and past grievances in the speech. You can bet on that as well. You can also bet that Elon Musk will be in the House, probably in a baseball cap and t-shirt. Hell, he might even take the podium and say a few words. Who knows? Maybe he'll even have his kid on his shoulders again, probably wiping more boogers on the furniture. Who knows? He does have 14 kids to choose from, so it shouldn't be difficult to find at least one rugrat to use as a prop, but that's a digression. But unlike the other joint sessions of Congress, this is an exceptionally consequential moment. It will define our foreign policy, which most likely will lead to the expansion of Russia. Trump may even reaffirm his desire for the United States to leave NATO. Not joking. And in doing so, rendering Article 5 moot. You know, that's the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all. And if we leave NATO, that would mean we would no longer be part of the all. It would also mean that Russia could expand beyond Ukraine and into the Balkans or into Poland without interference from the US. How better to get the Soviet Union band back together? But here's the truth. There is zero intersection of Russian and American geopolitical interests. Zero. Maybe in a Trump personal sense, but not in a foreign policy America first sense. Russia sides with North Korea and China. For starters, that hasn't changed. They are by definition our adversaries and have been for decades. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has called for Cyber Command to stand down on all Russia operations. It's more than slightly odd. That in no way makes America safer or in alignment with American interests. Who in the hell announces that we're standing down on investigations? The president may even call tomorrow night for easing of sanctions against Russia, even despite its invasion of Ukraine, which some people try to argue Ukraine brought it on themselves. It was the dress they were wearing. Even despite its continued interference in American elections. This, combined with the pause on Ukrainian aid, a reasonable person, and I like dealing with reasonable people, but a reasonable person would come to the conclusion that the president is putting Russia first and not America. Who tells an adversary or even an ally that they're lessening security in regard to the country? Publicly. Who are you really protecting? But regardless, I expect fireworks because the president is promoting the speech like an episode of The Apprentice. You know, because ratings and entertainment seemingly are far more important in 2025 than governance. Tomorrow, Tuesday, should be a tumultuous day, from the stock market to the State of the Union. But here's the truth. None of this is a game or a TV show, even though a game show host might be up there speaking. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly. Everything a president does, everything, be it by word or deed, does one of two things. It either increases confidence or it increases concern. It's hard to argue that anything a president does is inherently neutral. It's not like A president can do something and not have a ripple effect elsewhere. Granted, not everything a president does is massively important, but I would argue, and I am arguing tonight, that nothing a president does is wholly unimportant. Even the little things matter. One of the easiest ways to gauge confidence or concern, just look at the stock market. The president says something or signs an executive action or makes a post on social media, and what happens? The markets react, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. Over the past 2 days, the Dow has dropped more than 1,300 points. That says a hell of a lot. What the market does tomorrow, after tonight's joint session, will say plenty as well. And it won't be about whether they thought they liked the speech or whether they thought that the speech was funny or whether they were mad at some of the insults to the speech. It won't have anything to do with that. If it instilled confidence, the markets will likely rebound from that 1,300 point drop in the past 2 days. It'll likely rebound in a big way. If it freaked out investors more than they're already freaked out, the drop will continue. That's what I'm looking for. And that has nothing to do with my analysis. I'm looking at how markets, how countries will respond. Why? Because everything a president does, be it by word or deed, either increases confidence or increases concern. And this is an extremely precarious moment for our nation. We are now in trade wars with not one, but 3 different countries. And 2 of them, in theory, are our allies, or maybe they used to be our allies. Our economy was already fragile due to inflation. You heard President Trump talk about that. Inflation is still a real thing. You know what else is real? Bird flu. That's also real. That's affecting our groceries. That's affecting our supply chains and other factors. And I made mention of it earlier, but I want to reiterate the sister of North Korea's Kim Jong-un, I don't know what her title is, but she's influential. She threatened the U.S. given the arrival of a U.S. aircraft carrier in South Korea on Sunday. That's going to impact the markets. There's the uncertainty of the Israel-Gaza ceasefire. There's the uncertainty of Ukraine and Russia, the war, whether there'll be a mineral deal, whether there'll be an actual ceasefire, whether there'll actually be peace, what concessions are going to be made. And we've already said that we're going to pause our aid to Ukraine, which means probably end it altogether. That is going to send a message, and different countries are going to respond in their own way, and our markets are going to respond. And it doesn't really matter whether you like the speech. It doesn't really matter whether you hated the speech, because everything a president does, be it by word or deed, either increases confidence or increases concern. And you don't have to take my word for it. I know with some of you things like, Mo, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And you know what? I may not. That's why tomorrow I'm going to watch and see the response, because that says more and carries far more weight than anything I have to say. You don't have to take the word of anyone in the spin room on cable news, and they are spinning. They are going to try to tell you everything they want you to believe, not actually what you actually saw. The president did one of 2 things. Either helped allay the fears surrounding these issues that I just told you about, or he made everything all the worse. And you'll see it in the stock market. And stock markets usually react negatively to uncertainty or negative economic news like tariffs. You'll see it in our grocery store prices. You'll see it in our future trade agreements. You'll see it in our gas prices. The speech tonight may or may not be memorable. In fact, I can't remember half of it. The guy spoke for like an hour and 40 minutes. I remember a line here or there. You may remember 2 lines, but likely none of us will remember of what was said in the coming months. But this is what we will remember. Tonight's joint speech was not an olive branch. It was not a picture of a unified America. It was basically a campaign speech for a job he already had, relitigating the last election, assessing blame for anything negative and claiming credit for everything else, both real and imaginary. And there's going to be a response to all of that. And whether you like the speech, you may not like the response. So I'm just saying, slow down. The impact of the speech tonight, I would say more so than other speeches, will be felt. It'll be real and really remarkable. It starts tomorrow because the response is not just here. Canada will have a response. Mexico will have a response. Europe will have a response. Ukraine will have a response. And then from that, the markets and the world will give us a better sense of the impact of that speech. Because to me, that is far more important than ratings, viewership, or dare I say, owning the libs, or at least it used to be. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly. Charles Barkley, NBA Hall of Famer. He was on a podcast called The Steam Room with Ernie Johnson. And if you know Inside the NBA, he's one of the co-hosts of Inside the NBA, one of the most popular TV shows, sports shows around. And we've talked about it here on Later with Mo Kelly. But here's what Charles Barkley had to say during this podcast. Quote, "I don't care who the president is. He's the president of the United States. It's bothered me the last 10 years. They're like, well, I'm not going, as in visiting the White House, because this certain person is president. Dude is the president of the United States. Even though I disagree with President Trump on some things, if I met him, I would still give him the respect and dignity he deserves. We can disagree, but it bothers me when these teams don't want to go to the White House. I'm just disappointed. We got so divided. Where did we get to as a country when we're like, we're not going to the White House? We don't like who is in there. That's just stupid," close quote. First, I think that's an oversimplification, but I'm not going to disrespect Charles Barkley. He's a friend of the show and he's been on with me. I respect his approach to cultural and social issues. He's honest, he's transparent, and he's definitely not a partisan. That is if you've ever really talked to him and listened to him. In fact, we've discussed this on various levels on my show. But here is something I think Charles Barkley has missed in this discussion. Whereas I personally agree with him, this is not a personal decision in the context we're talking about here. We're talking about teams, and they largely have to agree as a team. Good luck with that. Dozens of athletes, all with a voice, all with a say. Not a personal decision ultimately. It's a group one. And it is most definitely a controversial one in today's world. Now, we should live in a country and in time where it's not a controversial stance to visit the White House and shake hands with the president. It should be that way. But this is not that country anymore, and this is no longer that time. After arguably the most partisan speech before a joint session of Congress in television history just last night, whether you liked it or not, it was severely and supremely partisan. I think it is fair for an athlete to say, hey, you know what? I'd rather opt out. And to say it's stupid, to use Charles's word, is to then put the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of the player or players. And that is also unfair to them. It shouldn't be on their shoulders solely. Now, some of the onus is on the president too. And that's true of any president. You can't say on one hand, the players need to be above the personal and petty politics and not also expect that of the president himself. Here's why. The president presently and previously has directly involved himself in the affairs of athletes. He's insulted athletes. He takes stances on issues of sports, from NASCAR drivers, Confederate flags in NASCAR, kneeling in football, comments and very personal insults of innumerable athletes from LeBron James on down. You can't only put it on the shoulders of the athletes themselves. And not only that, there are also social consequences attached. Artists who have performed at either Trump inauguration, for example, have been shunned. Careers like singer Chrisette Michele have been effectively ended. She performed at the first inauguration. Artists like Snoop Dogg have even been boycotted after his appearance at the second inauguration. Visiting the White House is no longer seen as some innocuous and apolitical decision. And I understand why there are those who would rather not have to deal with either the headache or the consequences. It's not fair, but it's a fact. Whereas the office of the president is bigger than one person and transcends that one person, that distinction is largely irrelevant to people now. The very fact that athletes are judged for either visiting or not visiting is testament to that fact, and you can find evidence of that in Charles Barkley's own remarks. And this goes back to my conversation with Jackie Ray earlier in the week. It is more than slightly hypocritical to hold athletes to a higher standard than the actual president of the United States. Me personally, I would be fine with it, and it would be an honor to visit the White House, regardless of president. But I understand why those others may not feel the same way and feel that it's an outdated practice, more suited for a civil time in America. We're going to have to make a decision at some point. If we really want to keep politics out of sports, hear me now. If we really want to keep politics out of sports, then we have to, at the minimum, stop forcing athletes to engage in political activities and stop ignoring presidents who insert themselves into pro sports. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly. And before we get out of here, I have my final thought for the week. And I've been ruminating over this for quite some time. And I don't know if people know how sincere I am when I say this about how I want more political competition in this state. It's better for you. It's better for me. It's better for both parties when there's real competition. And you can turn on talk radio here in California. I mean, beyond KFI, but it's inclusive of KFI, but not exclusive to KFI. It could be some other station. And you will hear the never-ending complaints about how much is wrong with the state of California or the county of Los Angeles or the city of Los Angeles or the combination of all of them. I see it on social media. I read your messages. I listen to talk radio more broadly. It's the same complaints over and over again. From homelessness to crime to graffiti, cost of living, all of it. And to some degree or varying degrees, they are all legitimate issues. Do not get me wrong. They're legitimate issues. I'm not so sure the complaints are sincere. And what I mean by that is it's really disappointing me that we've gotten to this place where the complaint seems to be the point of it all. We're not happy unless we're unhappy. We would rather sit back and point and say, look at that graffiti, look at that homelessness, look at this crime, and not really be about the business of doing what needs to be done to provide a viable alternative or work towards solutions. It seems like the complaint is the whole point. As if we really don't want any solutions. We would just rather complain about the Democrat in office or how this is a one-party state. It's a cottage industry. You know what I'm talking about. You probably participated in it. You probably did it today. And I've been begging. This is really sincere. I've been begging for the Republican Party, for the state of California to get serious for once. Put forth real candidates. And that means developing talent. Not just putting up a tomato can or a potted plant 4 months before the election and cosplay as a real party. And then you say, oh, well, the Democrats cheated. Oh, well, people are too stupid, low information voters, and they voted Democrat again. I guess we got the government we voted for. Not really. But we saw this with Steve Garvey when he was running for senator. He was never serious, never had a chance. Larry Elder, same. Rick Caruso ran as a pseudo-Dem for mayor. He almost won, but he ran as a Democrat, basically trying to fool people. And the Democratic Party never embraced him. And I was musing out loud about Mayor Bass, Karen Bass, who has been in all sorts of trouble, political trouble as of late. There's this recall effort, we talked about that, which is being organized as we speak. Multiple ongoing investigations as to the handling of the fires back in January. I mused out loud then. When will the Republican Party at least act like they want to govern and put up a legitimate candidate to run against Bass in the June 2026 election? There is not a better time, and she is not more vulnerable as mayor. But the Republicans have to be willing to try in this majority Democrat city. Mayor Bass has already declared her candidacy for re-election. And so it got me thinking, and I looked up just to be sure to find out who else is running as of right now. We're about maybe 14, 15 months out. This is the time that you declare. And you know who else has declared their candidacy? Nobody. Not one person. That means not one Republican, not even one other Democrat to oppose her. For all the hot air about how horrible Mayor Bass is, or how she needs to be recalled, or how she needs to resign, there is not one Republican even up for public consideration. There is no alternative for us to consider. Not one person who's out there building bridges, not one building their profile, name recognition, relationships, nothing. Not one person, not one Republican. And with each passing day, it makes it even more likely there won't be any serious challengers, even beyond Rick Caruso, who's still playing the role of a Democrat, and he'll probably never be genuinely embraced by the party, which limits his likelihood of becoming mayor. We say we want a choice. We say Democrats have run the city, the county, and the state into the ground. But at no level is the Republican Party even trying. They're just more content to complain. And maybe that sells. Maybe that's just better entertainment. Let's complain about how bad the city, the state, the county is, and just point at the Democrats, not actually trying to offer up a solution or a better way or even a different way. And until the Republican Party specifically starts trying to act as if it wants to do more than complain and actually govern, then nothing will ever change. And we'll get the same politicians and the same level of governance. And maybe that's the whole point of it all. Maybe it's just preferential to complain. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly.